Can you talk about the genesis of the project? Like how you chose this style and this story?
When they kind of came to me and they asked me about working on the show, I kind of looked at a lot of the older Batman comics, and the one thing I noticed was it sort of just felt like it was the same villains over and over again. You know, Joker, Harley, Two-Face, Penguin, who else? It just seemed like it was the same, everything that we've seen before, and kind of everything that had been covered on Batman the Animated Series, and I just sort of felt like it's kind of been done, and if we want to do something kind of different with the show, we maybe need to go in a different direction. So one of the things was that I kind of pitched was, what if we do different villains? Like, what if we use villains that haven't really been used before? So that's kind of how we started, and then we just tried to kind of almost look at the show. Also, too, what if Alfred wasn't the butler? You know, so that was kind of another take on the show. And then Mitch and I worked on that, and we kind of pitched it, and then that was kind of the direction that we went in. And then visually, CG was a new factor, and we wanted it to be more kind of, I don't like to use the word because it just feels like it's overused, but we wanted it more cinematic. And most CG kids cartoons are very brightly lit, and it's like, let's make this look more like well, it's the subject matter. It's Batman, you know, it needs that kind of film noir tone. So, Butch Lukic, who is my supervising, wait, I want to get his exact title. Butch is the supervising director, but he worked on the original Batman series, and he's worked on a lot of other projects, you know, Bruce Timm projects. We've always liked kind of 70s kind of detective movies. So Butch is really into, you know, he's got a really good eye for composition and the look of that. So rather than going kind of 40s film noir or kind of gothic, I mean, we kind of wanted to feel more contemporary or modern. So that was sort of the other approach. So it was sort of, here are the things that have been done with Batman. What are areas of Batman that kind of haven't been done? What can we explore and kind of give the show sort of a fresh kind of visual feel, and then even tone. And it's interesting because some of the stuff that Mitch and I think thought the show was going to be, I think we did that, but I think once you start to put it all together, the show changes, it evolves. So on one hand, the show I think is more filmic, but it also got kind of bigger. Its scale got kind of huge. So anyway, I hope that answered many questions. I was trying to think of as many questions to cover for all of you. So anyway,
on the subject of the villains, how do you avoid or approach trying to make them distinct? Like, how do you avoid going, you know, like doing a Clue Master story that's just a Riddler story with a different guy, or having, you know, Magpie is just Poison Ivy?
Well, I mean, we talked about that. I mean, we talked about. I think what's been good about using the new villains is it also changes aspects of Batman that you haven't seen before. So, yeah, we did talk about that. We talked about what are iconic things about Batman villains and how can we bring that to these new villains. Like, a lot of people have asked about, like, well, how are you going to approach Professor Pig? it's not like we're trying to change it, but we only have 22 minutes to tell that story. So you kind of have to try to figure out how to make Professor Pig iconic, and narrow him down. We don't have like a 12-issue story arc. We don't have a year to develop that character. We have 22 minutes. So we kind of felt like, well, we have to change some things. But I think the theme that we went in with Pig and Toad, for example, is it was kind of Wind of the Willows, but it also ended up, they became kind of like a twisted Holmes and Watson, and it felt like it flowed. It felt like it had a theme, and that seemed like that was more important for that to track than for all this backstory. The 22 minutes of backstory, we couldn't just get into all of it. So Magpie too, as we were talking about her kind of dual nature and her dual sides, it's like, well, gee, that's kind of like Two-Face, but then it's also kind of like this. So it felt like we were on the right track with the villains. I mean, it felt like something fresh. It felt like an aspect of things we couldn't do with Two-Face, things we couldn't do with Catwoman. That's what felt kind of nice about using those new villains. If that makes sense.
It does. It really does see the CG. Computer animated things on TV don't always look great. Seems to be kind of shortcuts taken, but this not only does it seem like a really fully realized world, because I know you guys took a really long time in building the thing, but I do really feel like you guys are trailblazing in a certain degree.
Thank you. I hope so.
Yeah. So is this something that you are actively trying to kind of change the face of kind of computer graphic animation?
Well, the questions I kept asking is, well, why does everything else look this way, and can we make it look like all of these things that we like? We kind of, I think maybe rather than referencing other CG movies or cartoons, we went to movies, we went to live action, we went to the subject matter, crime stories or film noir. We looked at that stuff. And I think in the beginning we did look at a bunch of stuff, and we kind of realized, well, a lot of people aren't filming stuff at night. A lot of people aren't showing cities. A lot of people aren't doing characters with kind of capes like Batman. And I think that's also what made us kind of nervous about the show. It's like, well, nobody's doing that. How come no one's doing this? So that, just those things, I don't think people realize how difficult it is or how challenging it is. Cloth is very difficult. Hair is very difficult. And we were trying to do that on a kind of a TV budget. So I think people are so used to seeing feature quality CG stuff. Trying to do that in a TV show, I think, was challenging. So there's differences between 2D and CG. There's some stuff we do that's very similar, but the process is longer now, and we're reviewing the material now longer. I mean, Butch is going over it, and we kind of we're fleshing it out more. There's more phases to it, different than 2D. So, Butch is kind of going over everything, and then the directors are trying to kind of wrangle it and manage it. But what's difficult for them is there's a lot of restrictions. There's things that the difference is you can draw a shot, but now you're kind of shooting it through a camera lens, and that really changes the scale and scope of things. And now we almost have like, we have an animation supervisor, T.G. Sullivan, and we have an effects and lighting supervisor, Frederick Goudreau. So that's almost like having a cinematographer. That's almost like having Butch is like almost like we got so bogged down. I think everybody's job slightly changed, and everybody sort of dogpiled and switched, and we ended up having to do a lot more than I think we realized. I mean, it was huge. I mean, building Gotham City was huge. Kind of filming it was bigger and more difficult than I think people realize. Like, so.
Are you done with the first season as far as legwork is concerned?
No. I mean, we are reviewing and reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. It's kind of like you don't draw it anymore. You kind of have to build it, then you film it, and then you're. I think the difficult thing too is you're approving the animation, but you're lighting it last. And with something like Batman, so much of Batman comes together in the lighting. So you're looking at all of this footage and you're kind of guessing what it's going to look like. And that's another thing about it, because it's not like you can paint a concept, but it changes and everything. So I don't think people realize you're looking at it gray. You're looking at it with some color. You're looking at it without effects in there. Yeah, and it's raw, and it's like, what are we going to get back? I mean, that in some ways is kind of terrifying. It's different than looking at just pencil animation. It's really, you're seeing it kind of evolve. But I mean, that was the other thing too. We were like, this is what we know we want it to look like, but you kind of just don't know. And now I realize why other people don't do that, because it's really hard, and I think we kind of bit off more than we can chew. But I mean, and the other thing too I will say is, I think in the beginning the characters were a little bit more animated, and it looked more lively, but it didn't fit for Batman. And you don't realize that until you start kind of working on it, that it's like you're so used to CG animation too, kind of being real bouncy and full, but when you have Batman do that, it just doesn't work right. So we were kind of like, no, we got, Butch was like, tone that down, and TJ is like, yeah, tone that down. We were really, there was a lot of kind of development kind of going as we were going. I mean, the lighting and there's stuff you can storyboard, there's stuff that you can kind of, everything is sort of a guessing game. On every level of the production, you're kind of guessing what it's going to look like until you go to that next stage, So it was a challenge. I mean, visually kind of getting it to where it was. And I don't think people realize how kind of difficult that is.
Was there any pushback from the studio when you pitched it as not using the bigger Batman villains? Because they could see it as potential lost revenue tying advertising.
I think that was one aspect where once we kind of pitched the concept and everything, I think everyone was like, hey, that sounds cool. Like, because I think the challenge is, well, how do you take Batman and make him new and fresh? What can we do to make it more exciting? And even us as the creators, we don't want to keep repeating ourselves. And you're just going to kind of end up with the same thing over and over again. So we're really, I think everyone was excited about it. So even DC was, we presented some villains and they were really similar to what had been done before. And even DC was like, no, you can change it. You can go further with it. So everyone was very supportive of that.
I've got one really specific question.
And this will be our last one.
Okay.
In the first scene of the first episode, Batman kind of confronts those two as who are robbing the building. The guns in that scene, were they like redesigned? Because they're very recognizable guns, but they're also very distinctly cartoon guns.
Well, I think everything that's going on, we have to kind of be responsible about that. So, you know, I'm a little uncomfortable about the portrayal of that, but so much of guns are part of that world and part of what Batman's about. So, you know, it's you have to be responsible about that. That's all I can kind of say. I mean, you are making this and you are portraying those kinds of images, and you can see how that affects people. So, I don't know if that's really an answer, but
Thank you.
Can I get a picture?